Mr. Roberts, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View. Happy Youth Day, if I may say so, although you and I are outside that bracket now. Yes,
good afternoon.
Yeah, just first up, just to set the scene for us, when did you start this survey? How many people were involved with it? If you could just give us a breakdown of your methodology, very quickly.
Yes, this is a nationally representative survey series undertaken by the Human Sciences Research Council. It's called the South African Social Attitude Survey. And it's approximately 3,000 individuals that are interviewed around the country across all age groups, 16 years and older. And it was conducted, we actually started before the lockdown, but there was an interruption with, moving to level 5. And then we resumed and completed in the latter stages of 2020 and early 21. So it was wrapped up by February 21. So it is weighted to be representative of the adult public.
Okay, the South African Social Attitude Survey. All right, now in this particular case and on this question on this day, we are focusing on the response you got around about June 16, 1976. What was the question you asked, and give us a sense of how that was responded to?
Yeah, we asked a set of questions that dealt with different aspects of what's known as collective memory in the country. And as part of that, we asked about basic public awareness of different key historical events.
Mr. Roberts, are you there? Oh, shucks, what a pity. We'll hopefully, my producer, Bazugile, will try and get him back so we can continue our conversation. There was just a technical problem there. Apologies for that. But let's focus on this story next. He's back. Thank you very much. Mr. Roberts, are you there? Mr. Roberts, are you back with us? We lost you there for a while.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that.
There was an issue of connectivity, yeah. Okay, I was saying, you were asking them around collective memory of key events in the history of the country, and then?
Including, and one of those events was the 1976 Soweto Youth Uprising. So we asked whether they had heard of this event, and if they had, whether they had just very basic understanding, or if they were comfortable enough to be able to describe what the event was about to another person. So on average, we found that 71% of South African adults were familiar with the 76 uprising, but 27% were not. But as you've indicated from the president's newsletter, there was a very strong generational difference that came through when we analysed it, and particularly amongst the so-called Generation Z or Born Frees, those who were born in 1997 and after. In that case, what we saw is quite a high level of that age group had actually not heard of 76 before. It was almost 40%. And so we saw a particular dip. It was much higher amongst older age groups. So it's something very particular about this generation that's come through now. And we saw that only 20% of that age group felt they were comfortable enough to be able to describe what the key aspects of this event were. So quite striking patterns, generational patterns to knowledge, and a worrying decline amongst the so-called born free.
Yeah, the president points to that worrying decline, and he quotes celebrated African author Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who said that, memory is important for consciousness, because consciousness helps us in terms of driving change. You are asking questions about collective memory. Why is the HSRC interested in finding out our collective memory?
Well, I think it goes back to what the President has argued, and it's about the relevance of certain key events for the present, distilling the lessons and applying them to the present. And I think, as we saw from his speech, the issue about active citizenship amongst our youth, about youth mobilization, around the issues and the challenges which confront them. So looking back to 76, in particular 45 years ago, and reflecting on the kind of broad-based mobilization that happened, and how the youth were at the forefront of pressing for fundamental changes in society. And I think we've seen that resonate with the youth of certainly the Thieves Must Fall generation, and there's an appeal today, as we reflect on the meaning of Youth Day 45 years on, about how the youth can mobilize even further to try and deal with some of the overwhelming challenges which confront them, including the high levels of youth unemployment, poverty, inequality.
Yeah, I was 16 years old in 1976 at Maurice Isaacson High School, as I reflected at the start of the program at 1 o'clock. I mean, there was no cell phones, no WhatsApps, no digital, nothing. It was word of mouth, and you had to physically attend a meeting to get mobilized and be part of that. Very briefly, as we conclude, I mean, the youth of today, particularly the Gen Z, they're like digitally enabled like nobody before in history. I mean, they've got the tools, but I guess they're complaining about the doors that are not being opened, maybe, for them to grab those opportunities. So I think even our generation of 1976 have a historic responsibility today to ensure an improved future.
I think Reverend Chikane was on ENCA earlier this morning, and he was talking about how the generation of 76, despite the lack of the modern technologies, actually were able to mobilize and plan very effectively. So his appeal was he'd like to see more mobilization, more effective mobilization, using the kind of technological tools you referred to. I think the other thing for me to say is one of them, I don't want the takeaway message to be that the youth are apathetic. They don't care about the past. And our survey shows very clearly that 71% of Generation Z, of the born frees, believe in the importance of remembering his key historical events. So it presents a real opportunity. It presents an opportunity. There's a real demand for more information amongst the youth, and real appetite for learning around this. It's really incumbent to ensure that the resources, particularly educational resources, whether it be through the school curriculum, whether it be through informal oral history, is provided so that demand, that need is met.
Yeah, and I think those of us who are still around walking this earth have a responsibility to impart more knowledge, find forums, and contribute in one way or another to make sure that the Gen Z who are hungry for this information are getting it appropriately. Thank you very much. That's Benjamin Roberts from the Human Science Research Council. He was heading up this research on South African social attitudes.